It will take some time for these sanctions to roll out and for the impact to be felt in Iran. What is really needed is for Europe and the United States to join together and develop a common program to pressure Iran more significantly so that we compel the Iranians to have a debate inside of their leadership as to what do they seek more, stability and economic success, or involvement in the region and interference in their neighbors' lives.
Norm, you say that you need good cooperation between the United States and the EU. It is hard to recall another time when relations between the EU and the U.S. were at such a low. Do you see that happening, and what are the implications if they can't get on the same page?
Well, at present, the cooperation is going to be somewhat difficult strategically, but it's important to note that America and the European Union continue to speak. We're speaking as recently as today, I understand. So diplomatic contacts are going forward. But what is needed is for Europe to take severe steps against Iran's economy. And this will involve Europe's insurance sector, its banking sector, and its financial institutions.
No, there's a lot of discussion here in Israel about that clash that we just saw between Israel and Syria overnight. Let me ask you, is the U.S., the Trump administration, doing enough to counter Iranian entrenchment in Syria?
Well, at present, it's difficult to see what the U.S. can do from the location of its forces in country. But again, the best way to hurt Iran's presence in Syria is to hurt their ability to fund forces. Iran provides hundreds of millions of dollars to Lebanese Hezbollah. It's able to ship material, personnel, provide training to personnel, and move money into Syria. The best way to impact that is to damage their capacity to have a routine logistics pipeline. And that requires sanctions.
Well, if we're talking about sanctions and stopping the flow of money into Iran, in the past, before the nuclear deal, during that process, China got on board with sanctions against Iran. But what now that Trump has withdrawn from the nuclear deal? Can you imagine that those countries will get back on board with sanctions that could achieve that goal you're talking about?
So in the short term, this is going to be difficult. But as time passes, international companies have a simple choice. Where do they wish to invest their money into and to cooperate commercially? With a $1 trillion U.S. market or with an Iranian market that is not very profitable, even without sanctions, a government in Iran that is susceptible to sanctions at any time, and a government which tends to hold as hostage international assets in their country. Over time, companies with an international exposure are going to move towards the United States, and that will have an impact on Iran. I think the short answer is that in the near term, whatever the U.S. does will have difficulty changing Iran's behavior. But in the long term, Iran is going to face significant economic pressures and will have to make hard choices.
Norm, I'm interested in your bigger picture perspective as somebody who has dealt with Iran so closely and with the Middle East in over 30 years at the CIA. How would you sort of categorize the Iranian threat today versus what you saw during all your time in the agency?
Well, the Iranian threat is very significant at present. Iran is literally changing the DNA of the region. You have Iran exporting advanced missile technology to surrogates in Yemen as well as into Syria. Iran is, in essence, enabling a missile war on Saudi Arabia and making threats against the United Arab Emirates. Iran has sponsored, developed, trained, and sustains dozens of proxy groups throughout the region, ranging from elements of the Taliban to Hamas, the Palestine Islamic Jihad, multiple groups in Iraq. But most importantly, Iran is empowering them with these terrible weapons. I think Iran is in essence using what I call a cookie cutter approach. It's the same cookie cutter, but just different dough in each country. And this is something that is no surprise. And it should be no surprise to Europe. And Europe's response to the terrible attack on Israel is going to tell a lot about their willingness to stand up against the regime.
Norm, I have to ask you if I can. Iran is going to be one of many challenges that the CIA is going to have to deal with in the coming years. Is Gina Haspel the right person to lead the agency at this time?
So let me make this clear. I personally know Gina Haspel. I have seen her in multiple operational, bureaucratic, administrative, and policy discussions. She is absolutely the right person to lead the Central Intelligence Agency. She is certainly the most qualified individual I can think of in memory to take this job. It is a good thing for America, for Israel, and the world if Gina Haspel were to assume this position.
Norman, as you know, there's plenty of critics of her nomination as well. What do you say to those who say her time running so-called black site prison in Thailand should disqualify her for the role?
Well, she managed a facility undertaking a program that was approved by the president, briefed to Congress, reviewed by multiple interagency lawyers, and mandated by headquarters. That is a small part of her entire career. Throughout the rest of her career, she worked very successfully on counter-terrorist issues, on Russian issues, and she managed the organization. In fact, I think what's sometimes lost in this debate is in her position, she's managed a major U.S. government agency, and that is a skill set that you don't easily acquire. So it means that were she to be confirmed, she's not able to start the next day with a knowledge of all the major issues, but she can move the various levers in the agency to execute those issues. She also has superb relationships with overseas partners who are so important to enabling our joint work.
All right. Well, the CIA and the White House will certainly have their work cut out for them in this changing Middle East. Norman Roule, great to have you with us, as always.
My pleasure.
All right. We're going out for a